It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon, while the sun's light failed, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last. When the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God and said, "Certainly, this man was innocent." And when all the crowds who had gathered there for this spectacle saw what had taken place, they returned home beating their breasts. But all his friends, including the woman who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance watching these things. Amen, and thanks be to God. From the reading from the Gospel of Luke. So Jesus is dead. He's been crucified on a cross for each and every one of us. Many of his disciples were not there to see it. They had run and hid. And the woman stood at a distance and watched everything. And the high priest stood and watched over this sentence. They'd seen Jesus crucified. They stopped his work. They would go back to their normal routine, their normal work, and yet nothing would be normal from this moment on it, and only a centurion here sees the Son of God. It was dark, so very, very dark, like the dead of night. It was black as sin. Nothing strange in that, of course, except it was noon. The sun having blazed out of a cloudless sky just a moment before this. It was simply another ordinary day up until then. The usual routine executions to go through. And we'd watched them all as the latest batch of ne'er-do-wells had suffered in the heat, crying out for water as they squirmed and writhed in agony. Did I feel anything for them? Absolutely not. Not a thing. You get used to the screams after a while. But there was something about one of them this time which couldn't help but catch my attention, for there was a calmness about him. Even, you might say, an authority there, which left me breathless, unable to quite believe what I was seeing and hearing. He was in a terrible state. His back is an ugly mass of lacerations where the whip had bitten into him. Blood oozed from his head, his hands and his feet. Yet some, it seemed, felt even then he hadn't endured enough. They mocked him, they insulted him, they rebuked him, they tormented him, enough to make an ordinary man return their curses. Yet, can you believe it? I heard him with my own ears cry out, asking God to forgive them. Amazing, forgive them? And when he died, it was more uncanny still, for I swear as he drew his final breath, there was triumph in his eyes, for all the world as though he believed that ghastly death of his had some meaning, some hidden purpose. Heaven knows what it could have been. Yet it was the darkness that got to me. It was the darkness that got to me most, the way without warning. Literally out of the blue, the skies closed in as he hung there, and a cold and eerie hush seemed to cover the world. Now, coincidence, some called it, but not me. For I had seen enough to see that this man was special, innocent without a question, almost, you might say, the Son of God. Now, it's not like me to say that, for I'm not a sentimental type, no time actually for all that nonsense. But as I watched the man suffer, and when I saw him finally die, it was then that the light went out for me. The world was suddenly more black than it had ever seen before. It was dark, so very, very dark. I saw enough to convince me that this man was special, innocent without question, almost, you might say, the Son of God? Have you seen enough to say that this man is special? This man, Jesus, is the Son of God, that he's my Lord. Have you seen enough to say that? Amen.